Welcome to Nice and Blunt. My name is Adam Riancho, and in this video, I'm going to give you my win-loss picks for the NFC West. Teams with some really good talent at the top and maybe some underrated competition towards the bottom. But we're going to begin with the San Francisco 49ers. They are coming off an L once again in the Super Bowl, and maybe, just maybe, age will be a factor for players on offense that they really rely on. I wouldn't be shocked if you told me that Christian McCaffrey missed some time this year. Same goes for George Kittle, and same goes for Deebo Samuel, who always seems to get a little banged up as the year goes on. But let's take a look at their schedule. Here it is, Week 1. They get a Monday Night Football matchup against the Jets, and I do think they beat Aaron Rodgers. The Jets have a new offensive line, and I think Joey Bosa will go ham. So they'll be fully healthy. They have a long time to get this game plan set up, and I do think they can dominate Robert Saleh's defense. So a win in Week 1 gets them off on the right foot, but then in Week 2, they go on the road at Minnesota against their former backup quarterback. I do think they'll figure out Darnold's weaknesses and give him a rough time. I think they start off 2-0, a win at the Vikings. However, in Week 3, this is where I think they get their first L of the year. Historically, in the regular season, Shanahan kind of owns Sean McVay, but I think it might be a little bit like that Darnold versus Carson Wentz game at the end of last season. There will be some tricks up McVay's sleeve, and Puka Nacua, I think, will be the difference here. I'm going to give them their first L Week 3 at the Rams. If it was in San Francisco, I'd give them a win, but I'm going to give the Rams the victory in their home stadium at SoFi. It'll be the Rams' home opener of the season. So an L in Week 3, followed by an easy win Week 4 versus New England. It's going to be very hard for the Patriots to beat anyone, and I'm not giving them a win against the Niners. In Week 5, though, versus Arizona, I think they do take care of business. Early on in the year, the Cardinals are not going to be their best. Marvin Harrison Jr. might not look elite to start the season, and I think in Week 5, the Niners will take care of business, their 4th win in 5 games. However, in Week 6, they go on the road at Seattle, and the new coach for the Seahawks was the defensive coordinator of the Ravens. If you recall, on Christmas last season, Brock Purdy threw 3 interceptions, got benched against the Ravens, and I think he'll struggle again. I think the Seahawks pull an upset in Seattle. I'm going to give the Seahawks the win, loss number 2 for San Francisco. Then in Week 7, I think they will be kind of looking ahead to this game. It may be a factor as to why they lose Week 6 on Thursday night, but I don't think they beat the Chiefs. I think they're going to lose their 3rd of the season against Kansas City. I think the Chiefs are just a better team, and kind of like the Super Bowl, going to come down to the wire, but I'm going to give it to Patrick Mahomes. So they start off 4-1, now they're 4-3, not ideal, but in Week 8 on Sunday Night Football, a game against a team that they completely own. The Cowboys just can't beat them. No matter how hard they try, the Cowboys just look like the JV squad against San Francisco, and I think they dial up a massive, massive win here at home versus Dallas. So 5-3 entering the bye, not too bad, and I think they get another couple wins here at Tampa Bay coming off the bye. Should be an easier one. I don't trust Baker Mayfield that much. I'm going to give the Niners a win. And then in Week 11, I think versus San Francisco, there's no way they get swept by the Seahawks. So a win in Week 11. Now they're up to 7-3, feeling pretty good. But then they go on the road for 2 difficult games at Green Bay. I'm going to give it to LaFleur and Jordan Love. Maybe I'm wrong, but I think there's just too many weapons for the Packers. And like I mentioned at the beginning of the video, I kind of feel like injuries might mount up at this point in the season. So I think it's going to be a close one, kind of like that division game, going to be a high-scoring affair, but I'm going to give it to the Packers. I think they find a way to get it done, and the Packers win the 4th L for San Francisco here in Week 12. Then they get another road game all the way across the country at Buffalo, and I'm going to give it to Josh Allen. I think they have the better quarterback. At this point, their offense should be rolling, and while the defense is kind of a makeshift situation for Buffalo, again, I kind of feel like there might be some injuries that kind of mount up and give the Niners some problems. So I'm going to give the win to the Bills. I think Josh Allen is the difference, but it's going to be a very close game. And wouldn't shock me if they win, but I'm going to give the Niners yet another L. Their second 2-game losing streak of the season. But kind of like always, the Niners always hit their stride at the end of the season and go on a big win streak. I see them winning at least 4 straight games right here. I think they do beat Chicago. I'm not convinced Caleb Williams has what it takes to beat the Niners in his rookie season, so a win at home in Week 14. In Week 15 at home versus the Rams, I don't think they get swept at all. And then in Week 16 against their former protege, so to speak, Shanahan versus Mike McDaniel, the Miami weather is not a big factor, but I think it's just too much to handle. I think the Niners will get it done. A win in Week 16. And then in Week 17, I'm going to give the Lions another loss. I think it's kind of going to look like the NFC Championship game. There's just some bad decisions on 4th down by Detroit, and both teams put up over 30 points, but the Niners find a way to come back and get the dub. So 4 straight wins at this point. They're 11-5, and it's all kind of going to come down to Week 18 when it comes to the division. But I have a feeling that Arizona is going to give them a strong run for their money, and maybe you disagree with me. I wouldn't be shocked at all if I get some hate in the comments for this, but I'm going to give Arizona the win in Week 18. Kyler Murray is not a quarterback you can completely dismiss. I do think they're going to look a lot better at the end of the season, and I'm going to give the Cardinals a win in Arizona. This game is going to be very important to decide the division, and unfortunately, the Niners do not come away with it. An L, their 6th of the year in Week 18, 11-6. Is my prediction for San Francisco. So still a very good record, very respectable, but not as good as last season. And I do think injuries might play a factor in the middle of the year. I wouldn't be shocked to see at least 1, if not 2, of CMC, Kittle, or Debo miss a little bit of time. So let's see if the Rams can beat that 11-win mark, and I do think they can. I think in Week 1 on Sunday Night Football at Detroit, I do think they lose. I think the Lions will get it done. It's kind of going to look like the wild card game. Close game here, but I do think the Lions win on their home field. In Week 2 at Arizona, I think the Rams do take care of business. I think Marvin Harrison not going to look his best early in the season, and the Rams can find a way. In Week 3, though, their home opener of the season versus San Francisco, I don't think the crowd is completely in favor of the Niners, and I'm going to give it to McVay. It's a difficult spot. He struggles to beat Shanahan in the regular season, but I do think they can find that will to win, and Puka Nacua will be the difference. I'm going to give the Rams the win in Week 3. But in Week 4 at Chicago, Caleb Williams, kind of a rough entry to the season, a tough matchup here for the Bears, a win for the Rams in Week 4. And then in Week 5 versus Green Bay, Stafford always plays well against the Packers, and there is also a rivalry between McVay and LaFleur. So in Week 5, I'm going to give the Rams another win, their 4th straight, heading into the Week 6 bye a little bit early, but not the end of the world. Off the bye, I think they beat the Raiders. I'm not a believer in the Gardner Minshew Raiders this season, so 5th straight win, 5-1. But then in Week 8 on Thursday Night Football, anything can happen, and even though it's at home against Kevin O'Connell and the Vikings, I think the former offensive coordinator in that Super Bowl year gets the win. I think the Vikings have an excellent game plan dialed up, and I do think their pass rush finds a way to get it done. That Dallas Turner addition at pick 17 is the cherry on top. The Vikings with Sam Darnold somehow, some way, get it done. Justin Jefferson going to be the difference in this matchup. I'm giving the Rams their 2nd L of the season in Week 8. But in Week 9, I do think they travel to Seattle and kind of like last year, take care of business comfortably. I do think they can beat Geno Smith without really trying too hard. So another win, and then in Week 10 versus Miami, if it was in Miami, I'd probably give it to the Dolphins, but it's at home in Week 10 Monday Night Football. I'm going to give it to Stafford and McVay. I think the Rams win in Week 10. Week 11 at New England, probably their easiest win of the season. Weather is probably not going to be a factor just yet in Foxborough, and I have no confidence in Drake May. Give me a win for the Rams in Week 11. In Week 12, though, versus Philadelphia, one of their toughest games of the season, on Sunday Night Football, I think the Eagles get it done. I think the Eagles are going to have a excellent close to the season, and they're going to beat the Rams. This game could have a factor when it comes to deciding tiebreakers for that number 2, number 3 overall seed. I think both of these teams are playoff bound, but the Eagles come up with the victory, and I think that's the third L for the Rams this season. But then at the Saints, Week 13, not worried about it. I think that's an easy victory. Not a fan of Derek Carr this year. The Saints are not a team I believe in at all. Then in Week 14 versus Buffalo, I think they get their vengeance like they did a couple years ago. Remember that Week 1 opener, the Bills versus the Rams, and the Bills just dominated them? I think the Rams find a way to shut down some of the weapons for the Bills, and the fact that it's at home is a big factor. I'm going to give it to the Rams versus Buffalo Week 14. Yet another win for LA. But in Week 15 on Thursday Night Football, I think there's no fucking chance that they sweep the Niners. So an L Week 15 on the road, not going to happen. In Week 16, though, I do think Stafford versus Rodgers will be a big game, and Stafford usually plays well in that matchup. So another win, I'm going to give it to the Rams. I do think they're a better team than the Jets. And then in Week 17, I see an upset victory for Arizona, kind of like a Week 18 upset for the Cardinals against the Niners, like I mentioned earlier. I think Arizona is going to be a nightmare to deal with at the end of the season, and we'll figure it out. We'll find a way to get the win. So Week 17, a bit of an oversight for LA, and the Rams lose their 5th of the year. But I do not think they lose Week 18. I do think they sweep the Seahawks, and that game not going to be too close. I'm going to give it to the Rams. A final record of 12-5, and that is enough to win the division. So really good season for LA. The Rams are back in business and are in play to return to the Super Bowl. However, the Cardinals, let's take a look at their schedule. They're going to be much more improved than last season, but not looking good at the beginning of the season. They get 3 extremely difficult games to start off their season. At Buffalo, not going to give it to him. I think Josh Allen does figure it out. So an L Week 1 for Kyler Murray. Then versus the Rams Week 2, I don't think they get it done even at home. I'm going to give it to the Rams. So another L. And then against the Lions Week 3, I don't think there's any chance that they win any of these 3 games. So 3 straight L's, really tough way to start the season. And then in Week 4, they finally get a break at home versus the Commanders. Jaden Daniels still new to the league, and I'm not a believer in him just yet. So a win for Kyler Murray and Marvin Harrison Week 4. However, in Week 5 at the Niners, again, really difficult game. I think they lose in Week 5. So 1-4 to start the season is not good, but I do envision an upset in Week 6 here at the Packers. I think the Packers are kind of going to overlook them, and it's not like the Cardinals will be super uncompetitive. It's just the other teams that they faced and lost to are just that good. So they can still win against anyone, and I think they will kind of find a little bit of footing here. I do think they beat Green Bay in Week 5. A little bit of a hard victory, but I do think they beat Green Bay in Week 6. A hard road to get it done, but I do think it happens, and a little bit more confidence moving forward the rest of the season. In Week 7, they get a Monday Night Football game, their only primetime matchup of the entire season versus the Chargers, and I think they take it super seriously with a little extra time to prepare. I'm going to give it to Arizona. I think the Chargers are definitely a good team, but with a completely new offense, still kind of trying to find their footing, and I'm going to give it to Arizona. Their defense will step up, will shut down the run game of the LA Chargers. So I am a Chargers fan, but I do see a win for Kyler Murray, their 3rd of the season. So 0-3, now 3-4, not too bad, but now are some more difficult games. At Miami, I don't think it works out. I'm not going to give them the win there. I think the Dolphins definitely have the advantage in their home stadium. And then versus Chicago, this one could go either way. I think it could also decide a playoff tiebreaker for that number 7 seed, but I'm going to give it to Chicago. I think the Bears will figure it out, and I do believe in the Bears a little bit more. I think their offense has better weapons, and their defense also has more talent. So another L for the Cardinals, Week 9. And then in Week 10 versus the Jets, this one could go either way. This one is a coin flip, but I'm actually going to give it to Arizona. Kyler can definitely beat anyone, can also lose to anyone, and I think they find a way to beat Aaron Rodgers in Week 10. So at this point, they are 4-6. Not great, but not terrible. However, off the bye, I think these 2 road games are going to be a little difficult. On the road, I'm not too excited about it. At Seattle, I don't think they sweep the Seahawks, so I think they lose to Seattle and Geno Smith. And then I also think they lose to the Vikings. The Vikings are going to beat some good teams. So another L at this point. It's 4-8. Really not feeling too good about them. But I do think they can get some wins to close out the season. Week 14 versus Seattle, they will not get swept. So a win at home versus the Seahawks. One of those 2 games will be an L, the other a victory, so I'm giving them this one. And then in Week 15, I think it has trap game written all over. I think they're going to write it off as an easy victory, but the Patriots are going to be so tired of losing. I had to throw the Patriots a bone. I gave them this matchup, and it's probably going to be the key for the Cardinals to miss the playoffs. So an L in Week 16. They're 9th of the season, and at this point, they're fed up. They realize their mistakes, and they're not going to misfire as easily in these last 3 games. At Carolina, I definitely think they can beat the Panthers, so a win Week 16. And then some difficult division rivalry games at the Rams versus San Francisco. And you might call me crazy. I really don't care, but I'm going to give both of them the upset in each of these games. So a win to close out the season at the Rams versus San Francisco. Maybe it doesn't happen, but I think that Week 18 win is what keeps the Niners away from the division. But the Cardinals also beat the Rams Week 17, so both of those games a bit of a wash. And maybe you disagree with me, but 8-9 I think is a very feasible final record for Kyler Murray and the Cardinals. Not amazing, but not terrible. Definitely better than last year, and some reason for optimism going in to next season. So 8-9, they miss out on the playoff picture. But lastly, let's not forget about the Seahawks, who I am not a big fan of. I'm not convinced that they have a very competitive team this season. Geno Smith, I just don't think is the answer. And with a new coach, I think they might miss out on a few games that they probably otherwise would have in close fashion if Pete Carroll was still there. So a rough start to the season. I do think they lose Week 1 versus Denver. Not going to be as easy against Sean Payton as it was against Nathaniel Hackett 2 years ago. And I think Bo Nix bests Geno Smith in the season opener at home. So an L to start the season, not ideal. But then on the road at the Patriots, I do think they win. Whether it's Drake May or Jacoby Brissett, I do think they find a way. I do think they're the better team in that spot. But in Week 3 versus Miami, I'm going to give them another L. Don't believe they're the better team at all. And then in Week 4 at Detroit, not going to be like last year. They're not going to win in overtime. That one was kind of a lucky win. Not something I want to buy into to repeat. So 1-3 to start the season, not good. And then in Week 5, they get the Giants. That's an easy break. That one's a win at home. But then Week 6 versus San Francisco, like I mentioned earlier, their new coach gave Brock Purdy nightmares last season. I do think he finds a way to get it done. I'm going to give them an upset victory Week 6 versus San Francisco. So back to 500, 3-3. They're starting to feel a little bit okay, but I do think this is where they hit a very rough patch. At Atlanta, the Falcons play really good at home. I think Kirk Cousins is a much better quarterback than Geno Smith. So Week 7, they lose. Week 8 versus Buffalo, I do think they lose as well. Bills are definitely better than the Seahawks. And then in Week 9, I think they lose once again. I don't think they're going to have any luck against the Rams, just like last year, some really difficult L's against the Rams. So 3 straight L's, 3-6, and not feeling too good at this point in the season. After the bye, though, at the Niners, I don't think they win both of them. I think that's definitely an L. I think they have a chance to win the first one, but definitely not in the second one, so it won't sweep them, that's for sure. And then in Week 12 versus Arizona, I think they win. I don't think they're going to lose both matchups against the Cardinals, so at home I do give them the victory, their 4th of the year. But then they travel all the way across country against the New York Jets. I'm going to give it to Aaron Rodgers, a bit of a rivalry for him against this franchise. I'm going to give it to the Jets, and then I'm going to give it to the Cardinals in Arizona. I don't think they get swept by the Seahawks. So Yet another L. However, in Week 15, I do see them beating the Packers. It's probably not going to be an easy game, but I do have upset written on it, and I do have to give them a few interesting wins. So that game against the Niners, very interesting upset, and this game right here against Green Bay, an upset win for the Seahawks once again. So they're 5th of the season, but it's just not enough at 5-9, kind of out of the playoff picture completely. And then 3 straight L's. I don't think they beat the Vikings even at home. I think the Vikings find a way. And then at Chicago, the Bears are going to be desperate for a playoff spot. I do think the Bears get it done. Caleb Williams is a better quarterback. And then in Week 18 at the Rams, I just don't see a win at all. I think the Rams will sweep them. So 5-12 for Seattle. Rough season. I think Geno Smith is not the long-term answer, and they will find a way to replace him next season. Maybe Sam Howell gets some starts this year, but even if he does, I just don't think it matters, and I just have no confidence in the Seahawks to compete for a playoff spot. So that's what I envision. Maybe a injury to Tyler Lockett as well could be a factor at his age. Wouldn't rule it out completely, and maybe the run game also deals with some injuries as well. So this is how I see the division playing out. I have the Rams winning it at 12-5. They're going to be a very difficult team to beat this year, and I do think they win the division over San Francisco because the Niners lose Week 18 at Arizona. That one is going to be a critical game, but I think that Chiefs game is a big L, and losing to the Rams Week 3, also a big L on their schedule. But the Cardinals are better than last year. 8-9 is competitive, but not amazing. They're going to miss out on the playoffs just barely. And then the Seahawks, possibly a rebuilding year for them coming up. But 5-12 is 4th place, and that's what I see for the NFC West. That's it for this video. If you enjoyed, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more content like this. I'll see you in the next video. It's the NFC South, and then we'll move on to the AFC very shortly. But my name's Adam Riancho, and I'll see you next time. Thank you for watching. Nice and blunt.